Good evening and thank you for joining us. Investigators continue to search for the cause of that devastating fire at the Finnish Labor Temple last week. The probe is being hampered, however, by a number of environmental hazards that have come about as a result of the blaze itself. As Adam Riley reports, that could leave investigators in a situation where they aren't able to pinpoint the cause.
So we know it started, somewhere beyond the second floor.
Fire investigators are not yet ready to confirm or reveal what they believe caused the fire, which destroyed the roof and upper floors of the Finnish Labor Temple. Officials with Thunder Bay Fire Rescue and the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office have spent 4 days combing the scene following the fire which broke out last Wednesday night. Fire Prevention Captain Kevin Anderson says the massive blaze caused the roof to cave in on the third floor, which, as one would expect, has hampered their work.
So now you've got the third floor, but it's covered by a roof. A heavy roof, old roof, new roof, drywall, lath and plaster, right? The area that, sure, if we could get there and the roof was still there, it would be much easier. But now that the roof has collapsed, we can't look at that area of origin that we're suspecting.
Compounding that is the fact, according to Anderson, that every hour a fire burns, it just spreads further. And considering the fire burned for almost 24 hours, the entire third floor is now a heavily charred, collapsed husk, meaning investigators may never get up there, but they have turned to a different investigative angle.
We've been interviewing, people that were in the building that day, going through the steps and, again, trying to find that area of origin, but unfortunately, most of that third floor has collapsed in, or it's not safe to go into. So that makes it difficult because we can't go to that area of origin.
In several interviews with TBT News, building owner Brad McKinnon said he believed he knew the origin of the fire, but wanted fire officials to be the ones to confirm that cause. Anderson says he and the other investigators are still unable to provide a definitive answer, as there is a scientific method they must follow.
We look at the area of origin, look at patterns, see where things spread from. So until we can put our eyes on that area, we can't determine. We have to actually see something in terms of char patterns, burn patterns, to really confirm what it is.
From what investigators have seen on the inside, it appears much of the devastation was isolated to the roof and third floor area, thanks to the efforts of Thunder Bay Fire Rescue. And the main floor and the basement, where the beloved Hoido restaurant resides, were relatively unscathed, save for some smoke and water damage. Meaning despite the collapse of the roof, there isn't a concern for a complete collapse of the building. Investigators will likely wrap up their probe later this week. Adam Riley, TBT News.
The COVID-19 outbreak at Elsie McGill Public School is now over. The health unit says there's no evidence of additional spread of the virus there at this time. Here are today's case numbers. There are 11 new infections being reported. 10 of those are in the Thunder Bay area, while the other comes from elsewhere in the district. There are 3 household contacts and 3 close contacts from outside the home. 1 case relates to travel outside of northwestern Ontario, and 4 exposure sources are still unknown at this time. There are no new hospitalizations today. 3 people remain in hospital, with none in the ICU. There are now 153 active cases across the district. The Northwestern Health Unit is reporting 30 new infections today. 14 come from the Kenora Health Hub, 8 from Sioux Lookout, 6 are in the Dryden area, and 2 come from the Red Lake Hub. There are currently 4 people in hospital across the NWHU catchment area, and there are now 197 active cases. Premier Doug Ford says parents can expect to know in the coming days whether their children will return to school in the new year.
I know the minister has been sitting down at the table along with the Minister of Education, Minister of Health has, and they'll be having an announcement in the next couple days. But we just want to see how things go and obviously speak to the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Moore.
Ford made those comments during a tour of a Toronto vaccine clinic today. Joined by members of his cabinet, including Health Minister Christine Elliott, Ford praised frontline healthcare workers and every Ontarian who has received their doses. He says the goal is to administer up to 300,000 shots per day, and the rollout is going well. The province is introducing new measures to try to protect residents of long-term care homes from the fast-spreading Omicron variant.
These enhanced measures will help reduce the risk of transmission, particularly during the winter months. Effective December 30th, which is this Thursday at 12:01 a.m., all general visits to long-term care homes will be paused, unless you're visiting a resident in a palliative situation. As well, social visits from homes will be paused. All residents, regardless of vaccination status, can continue to leave the home for essential reasons like medical appointments. Recognizing the critical role that designated caregivers play in the lives of residents, each resident will be continued to allow to designate 2 caregivers who may visit them. Now, I do understand that these measures will impact many families, but we must remain vigilant, particularly against the new Omicron variant.
The government says it will monitor the situation and adjust measures as needed. All general visitors are already required to be fully vaccinated to enter a long-term care home in Ontario. As of November 30th, data showed 99% of staff and volunteers were fully vaccinated. Ontario is reporting 8,825 new COVID cases today, but health experts say recent provincial counts are likely underestimates. That's because, in part, of testing delays across the province. Mike Walker has more on that.
The lineup long and steady for a COVID-19 test at Women's College Hospital with high demand in the face of the dominant Omicron variant. Tom Durkin waited days to secure an appointment for his daughter.
A battle to get a test. We stayed up till just past midnight last night, and that allowed us to get a test here.
The demand for PCR lab tests soaring in the past week with testing centers at capacity. Anyone trying to book an appointment at some hospitals are met with this notice that appointments are fully booked and to check back later. Many people reportedly waiting days to book appointments and then again for lab results.
The result takes days, far beyond when you should be able to act on it. So I think the government should say, if you have a rapid test, assume that you have it.
In Ontario, daily case counts have been surging between 8 and 10,000, but health experts say that number is likely much higher.
10,000 number, it's been stuck for a while at 10,000 because that's probably the max that our system can handle, in positive results.
Just before the holidays, Ontario's top doctor warned the province may have to put limitations on PCR testing.
We have to anticipate that as this virus continues to double every few days, which is what it wants to do, that we may have to put some limitations on the PCR and on the RAT, and to be able to use RAT testing for a diagnostic purpose.
The province last changed its testing guidance in October 2020. At this point, anyone with symptoms or are a close contact are eligible for a PCR test. Mike Walker, CTV News.
Dr. Moore was scheduled to give an update on testing this afternoon, but that announcement has been postponed to allow the province to consider new relaxed isolation and quarantine guidance coming out of the United States. We'll have more on that later in the news hour. Well, back here in our city, area residents, the heavy snowfall brought some frustration for local drivers trying to navigate streets that hadn't been plowed yet. And the snow-covered roads also posed major problems for Thunder Bay Transit, which had to cut the service short last night after a number of buses got stuck. Corey Nordstrom has more.
City snowplows are now busy at work and have been since the early morning. But it was the portion of Monday night that they were off duty that caused so many issues. The significant snowfall meant city roads crews needed to be called in from their holidays, but acting roads manager Ian Spoljarich says it was no trouble getting a full complement of 60 drivers to work throughout the day. They started around 9 a.m. Monday, but the break from 6 at night to 2 in the morning greatly impacted drivers.
By the time it started to accumulate enough to start plowing, we did have some equipment out plowing the roads, but it was coming down so fast, as soon as we plowed it, it'd come right back down. And then we had to give the crews enough rest to be in for 2 a.m.
The snow-covered roads posed a huge impediment to transit drivers, as these videos show. There were over 20 incidents of buses getting stuck on their routes, forcing transit management to end the night at 9 o'clock, something they haven't had to do because of snow for at least 3 years.
When we reach a point where, as we did last night, where a third of the buses that were on city streets in service were stuck, it's at that point that we can't reliably provide a service for people. So the decision was made to end it a few hours early.
City roads and transit divisions were in contact during the storm, with snowplows focusing their work on arterial streets that are crucial to transit operations. Still, the departments will look at what was done to try to find ways to improve.
We're always reviewing what we do and trying to make things better. As for yesterday, we'll look back at that event and see what we could have done better. At this point right now, there's nothing I can really offer to say what we could have done better at this point, but there's always going to be that gap just because staff can't work 24 hours a day.
Corey Nordstrom, TVT News.
Meanwhile, area residents were left digging themselves out this morning after that first post-Christmas storm. Jessica Clement spoke to people out shoveling and snow blowing today and has more in this report.
Thunder Bay snowfall warning issued by Environment Canada on Monday proved to be correct, as the city received 18 to 25 centimeters of snow, with some areas south of the city reporting up to 35 centimeters. And while the heavy snowfall was expected, city residents didn't expect the freezing winds that came with it. There were mixed reactions to the winter weather when we spoke to people on the city's north side.
It's good timing for it now that we can get out on the ski hills and get out on the snowmobiles and everything. We were about due and it was coming, so it's an all right time for it for me.
I like snow. I really like how it looks, but when you're in it and you're trying to drive and you can't even see the lines or stop properly, it's not great.
While some residents did their shoveling and snowblowing on Monday night, others waited until Tuesday morning after the city snowplows had gone by. And although temperatures dropped a few degrees overnight, the cold winds had subsided considerably by the morning.
It's a little bit of work now, but we live in northwestern Ontario. What can you expect?
Well, it's a little more than I thought there was going to be, but it's good for cleaning today because there's no wind.
It was a good dump. The wind was pretty bad last night, but today it's milder, so it's not as bad shoveling it and snow blowing it.
There's a bit more snow in the forecast for Thunder Bay, but fortunately not as much as Monday's storm. Jessica Clement, TBT News.
Yeah, Mitchell, that was one heck of a storm yesterday.